Welcome to the Chamber Files. Every story you are about to hear is real. These accounts were sent to us directly by real people who lived through something they cannot explain and needed someone to hear it. If something has happened to you, send us your story at thechamberfiles@gmail.com. Your experience could be the next one told right here. Tonight, we have 4 accounts from people who worked the night shift and lived to tell about it. These are their words. Story 1, I was 21 when this happened. It was 2017, and at the time I was working part-time at a gas station a few towns over from where I lived. It was one of those jobs I only planned to keep for a few months, just until I figured out what I wanted to do next. The shifts were usually easy, a lot of ringing up snacks and cigarettes and paying for gas. During the day it was annoying but normal. The nights were different. The nights dragged. The place felt too bright inside and too dark outside, and every customer felt a little stranger than the last. That night I was working the closing shift by myself, and I still think about it all the time. The store closed at midnight. Around 9 or 10 at night, the phone started ringing. I answered without thinking anything of it. The second I picked up, I heard this weird voice. It was low and drawn out, like someone trying to sound like a killer in a horror movie. It sounded really forced, like someone doing an impression, but it was still unsettling. The voice asked if I was all alone in the store. I just stayed quiet for a second, then said something sarcastic like, "Yeah, you got me." And then I hung up. I figured it was one of my friends messing with me. I texted the group chat and asked which one of them was calling the store pretending to be a serial killer. They all found it funny and acted confused. One said he was at home, another said the same. I assumed they were just keeping the bit going. About 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. That same fake horror movie voice. This time, it asked why I hung up. I said once again, "All right, you got me." The voice let out this soft laugh that sounded weirdly real, not playful the way I expected. Then it said, "I should not be rude to people who know where I am." I hung up again, but this time I felt a little off. It was probably still a joke, but there was something about how calm the person sounded that got to me. Customers kept coming in, enough to keep me distracted. People getting gas, buying beer, getting lottery tickets. But every time things slowed down, I found myself staring at the phone. It rang a third time, around 10:40. I answered and immediately regretted it. The voice asked if the store always got this quiet that late. That got under my skin more than I wanted to admit. I said nothing and hung up. I started messaging my friends one by one. One was with his girlfriend. One sent me a picture from his basement. One was at a friend's house almost half an hour away. Even though the caller had never said my name, he was describing exactly what was happening in the store. Around 11, the calls started coming closer together. I stopped answering after the 5th one. The phone would ring, and I would just stare at it. Then, a minute or two later, it would ring again. That went on for about 15 minutes. I started checking the outside cameras more. The store sat by itself off a road that got pretty dead at night. There was a small patch of woods behind one side of the building, and an alley area near the dumpster. The cameras had blind spots, and the picture at night was grainy. I kept flipping through them, half expecting to catch one of my friends crouched outside laughing. I did not see anyone, though. Then I started hearing sounds outside. A tap somewhere. What sounded like a light scrape near the sidewall. Then a noise near the back that sounded like someone stepping on loose gravel. I texted the group chat again and told them to seriously stop. One of my friends actually called me from his normal number and said he genuinely was not involved. He told me to lock the door early if I had to. At around 11:40, one last customer came in. I remember the exact sound of the door because it made me jump. I looked up and saw what seemed like a regular guy at first, maybe late 20s or early 30s. Nothing outwardly crazy about him. He was not dirty or dressed strangely. He just had this blank expression. He did not say hello. He just walked in and started moving through the aisles. I watched him on the camera while pretending not to. He took way too long for someone who ended up buying one bag of chips. He kept stopping in different aisles. More than once, I saw the top half of his face appear above the shelves as he looked toward the counter. Not in a casual way, it felt like he was checking on me. My stomach had that heavy feeling, like my body already knew something was wrong before my brain wanted to admit it. He was in there for at least 8 or 9 minutes. Then he finally came up to the counter with his chips. He still did not say a word. So, I did not either. I just scanned them. When I looked down at the register, everything felt normal for 1 second. Then I looked up and caught him staring directly into my eyes. He held it for maybe 2 seconds. There was no expression on his face. Then he looked down and paid. I handed him back the bag, and he turned toward the door. Right as he pushed it halfway open, he stopped. He turned his head back toward me without fully turning his body. His chin was slightly lowered, so his eyes had to look up at me. Then he smiled. I still do not know how to explain that smile without sounding dramatic. It looked like he knew exactly how creepy he looked, and he was doing it on purpose. Every hair on my body stood up. He stepped outside, and instead of walking toward the pumps or toward a car, he walked around the side of the building. He kept his eyes on me through the glass the entire time. He kept that smile too. I stood there watching him until the angle cut him off. Then I rushed to the camera monitor and followed him there. I saw him head toward the side where the woods were. Then he disappeared into the blind spot behind the building. He did not come back out. I waited 10 seconds, then 20, then a full minute. He never reappeared. That was enough. I locked the door early. I texted my family and my friends and told them there was a creepy guy outside and I was not joking. I said if I stopped replying, something probably happened to me. I rushed through closing as fast as I could. Barely cleaned anything. Kept checking the cameras over and over. Nothing. When midnight hit, I decided I could not stay anymore. I grabbed my stuff, turned off what I needed to, and went to the front door. Relocking it from outside was the most tense 20 seconds of my life. Once I did, I took off running to my car. I got most of the way there, and just as I slowed down for half a second, I heard fast footsteps. Not running, but worse, somehow, like speed walking, slapping the pavement from the front corner of the building. I turned and saw him. He was moving toward me and my car fast. I yanked the door open, threw myself inside, locked it, and started the engine. I hit reverse and peeled out of that lot. I looked once in the mirror and saw him standing there in the lights, watching me leave. The next day I texted my boss and told him I was done working overnights. He looked at the footage and said the guy looked like a regular customer to him. He said maybe I had gotten spooked from the calls and connected things that were not connected. That made me furious. I was the one there. I was the one getting the calls. I was the one who saw him disappear around the building and come walking toward me in the dark when I tried to leave. I quit right after that. To this day, I believe the caller and that man were the same person. I cannot prove it. But I know what I felt that night, and I know what I saw. If that story made you want to hear more, subscribe to the Chamber Files right now. Every week, we bring you new accounts from real people, real events, real fear. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss one. Story 2, my name is Cadence. I work the closing shift at a small dive bar in the quieter part of my town. The place is right off the highway, but the parking lot has a back entrance open to the general public. It is nothing fancy, just a dimly lit spot where the regulars know each other by name, and the jukebox has been playing the same rotation of classic rock for years. Most of our customers are locals, truckers passing through, and the occasional lost tourist. The tips are surprisingly decent. I have learned how to handle the usual crowd, the talkers, the flirters, the quiet drinkers, and the ones who just want to be left alone. During the week, I work my night shifts alone. No bar back, no extra staff. It is obviously slower work, but I miss having company. I tend to be vigilant on those nights because we do get the occasional bar fight. That is why I clocked this particular man immediately. It was sometime after 1 a.m. on a Tuesday when he walked in. If I had to guess, he was in his late 40s. But he was extremely clean-cut and well-groomed. Not the kind of look you would expect in a place like this. He was wearing a black turtleneck underneath a black trench coat, well dressed but casual about it. He had this air of sophistication, like someone with real money, not the loud kind. He glanced around slowly before walking to the bar and sitting down. When I walked over, he ordered something top shelf without hesitation. As I poured, he asked if I liked working here. A normal enough question, so I answered honestly. I told him yeah and smiled back. He chatted with me for a bit, which I did not mind. The bar was quiet. Then, out of nowhere, he asked if I had ever thought about doing something bigger. That was a slightly strange question, but I gave him my standard smile and said I was happy for now. He nodded and sipped his drink, seemingly disappointed for a reason I did not understand. After a pause, he asked me what time I got off. I gave a vague answer, trying to brush him off in a friendly way. He smiled like he already knew something, then drained his drink, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, laid it gently on the bar like it was nothing, and walked out without another word. I did not know what to make of it. I figured I was never going to see him again. I was wrong. About a week later, he came back. This time he was not alone. There was a woman with him. She looked like she was in her mid-30s and was dressed in a way that did not quite match her age. Trendy but slightly off, like someone trying too hard to blend in with a younger crowd. Everything about her seemed calculated, from the way she smiled too easily to the way she leaned against the bar like we were already friends. Before I could even say hello, the very first thing she said to me was a compliment. She put on an overly joyful smile and said, "You are so pretty." Her fingers brushed my arm as she said it, lingering just a second longer than felt normal. I thanked her, but I could instantly tell something was off about this woman. The man did not speak, which struck me as strange given how talkative he had been before. They ordered drinks. Then the questions started flooding in. She asked how long I had been working here, how old I was, the usual small talk. But I could tell it was not small talk. She was studying me. At one point she looked over at the man, and it seemed like they were communicating without speaking. Then she leaned in and lowered her voice. She told me she ran an exclusive events club and was always looking for young, fun people for private parties. She said I would make a killing, $10,000 for a weekend. I let out a small, forced laugh and said it sounded too good to be true. She insisted it was real. Her smile never faltered. Then, casually, she said I should step outside for a second because there was someone who could explain it better. My pulse kicked up. I was not playing along anymore. I said I was good, firmly, with no smile. Just then, a group of loud customers walked in. The woman's friendly mask slipped just slightly before she and the man left without another word. I told my coworkers and my boss what happened. We all agreed to keep an eye out. My boss said he was a 15-minute drive away if I ever needed him, and that the security cameras would deter any trouble. There was not much more I could do. Those people had not technically done anything illegal. I tried to push it out of my head. But a few nights later, after closing, I saw the car. It was parked across the street, engine off, just sitting there. I told myself it was nothing, but the feeling of being watched crawled over my skin. As I walked to my car, I kept my keys clutched tight in my hand. When I pulled out of the lot, I checked my mirrors. The car followed. It stayed just far enough back to seem casual, but every turn I made, it was still there. I took a random turn onto a side street. Still there. I forced myself to stay calm and think. Then, without hesitating, I pulled into the parking lot of a police station. The second I did, the car sped off. Things were quiet for a while after that. But I knew it was not over. It was a slow weekday shift. By midnight, I was wiping down the counter and thinking about closing early. The door creaked open, and it was the woman. I sent my boss a text as quietly as I could. When I looked back up, she was staring at me with that same artificial smile. She walked to the bar and sat down with her hands folded neatly. I told her we were about to close, and she needed to leave. She made a pouty face and asked for just one old-fashioned. I figured pouring it would stall her long enough for my boss to arrive, so I turned around and started making it. Then, I heard it. The soft, unmistakable click of the front door shutting. I whipped around. She was gone. Through the glass, I saw it. a black van idling just outside. I ran to the front door and locked it as fast as I could. That is when I heard it from the back. Metal rattling. Someone was trying to get in through the back door. I grabbed the heaviest thing nearby and clutched it as I dialed 911. There was no way the police would get there in time. I was bracing myself for whatever was coming when headlights suddenly flooded the lot. It was my boss. The noise at the back door stopped. A few seconds later, the van peeled out. My boss had caught the license plate as it left. When the officers arrived and reviewed the footage, they found something I had not known. Just before the woman left, the cameras had caught two masked figures crouching near the front door, waiting. There was another person at the back trying to flush me out to the front. The plate number turned out to be unregistered. No leads, no arrests. My boss does not make me work alone anymore, but I still think about one thing every single night I go in. I still cannot figure out how they knew when I would be working alone. Story 3. I used to work the night shift at a gas station, off a quiet stretch of highway. I say used to, because after what happened a few months ago, I will not work a night shift again. It was just past 2:30 in the morning. I stepped outside for some air. The parking lot was empty. Just the pumps, the road, and a dark stretch of trees beyond. The neon sign flickered faintly, and it was hazy out. Even with the highway not too far off, it was silent. Right as I was about to walk back inside, I noticed something move at the edge of my vision. There was a person standing behind one of the pumps. He was wearing a dark red hoodie, hood up, both hands in his pockets. There was not a car in sight. He was not heading toward the store either. He was just standing there, half turned in my direction, watching me. I went inside but kept an eye on him through the glass. After a few minutes, he started walking toward the door. Slowly at first, then pushing through like he had made up his mind all at once. He walked up to the counter and did not say anything, just stared at me like he was sizing me up. Then, in a rushed and almost rehearsed way, he said his car had broken down just before the pumps. He needed a jump or some gas to get to the next town. I offered to call a tow truck. No, he said quickly, shaking his head. He just needed a flashlight. Maybe some help under the hood. The way he watched my reaction felt like a test. I asked where his car was, and he pointed at the monitor behind me. I turned, and to my surprise, there actually was a car parked out there. I almost believed him. But then it hit me. I had just been outside. I would have noticed a car out there. I glanced back at the monitor and saw the slightest movement near the back bumper. Someone was crouching just out of view. A cold wave hit me. I forced a calm smile and said I would help him, but needed to grab my phone from the back office first. I turned slowly, so I would not spook him. The second I was out of his direct sight, I slammed my hand down on the emergency panic button under the counter. The alarm screeched through the store. I expected him to panic. Instead, something shifted. The nervous energy disappeared. His whole body language changed. He actually relaxed. And then he smiled. Not a panic smile, not an embarrassed one. A slow, knowing grin, like this was entertaining to him. Then he turned and walked out in one smooth motion. I ran to the monitor just in time to see both of them sprint into the woods behind the station. Not toward the car. Into the woods. The car just sat there. Engine off. Headlights off. No one inside. By the time police arrived, the men were gone. No footprints leading anywhere. No sign of them. Then one of the officers pointed out something I had missed. The front passenger door of the car was hanging open. There had been a third person inside the whole time. The car had been reported stolen nearly a week earlier, over 100 miles away. No one came forward. No other crimes were linked to it. Just an abandoned car in the middle of nowhere with no explanation. That was months ago. I am still waiting for answers. And I will never work a night shift again. Story 4. This happened a couple of weeks ago. I worked the night shift at a large retail store. After a while, it starts to feel like you are just floating through time. The nights blend together. Same shelves, same routine, same dull hum of the overhead lights. I mostly stock the electronics section because it is quieter than the other areas. People do not exactly rush in at 2 in the morning to buy phone chargers. Most customers are night owls or truckers grabbing supplies. That is why I noticed him. At first, I did not think much of it. Just another guy wandering the aisles. But after a few minutes, I realized he was not shopping. He was not even pretending to browse. He just kept appearing. Every time I glanced up, he was nearby, hovering in the next aisle over, standing too still near the clearance section. He was not looking at anything. He was watching me. I went to radio someone, but the battery in my radio was dead. Eventually, I was debating whether to find a manager when I felt a hand wrapped firmly around my arm. I nearly jumped out of my skin. But before I could react, a woman's voice rang out, loud and overly friendly. "There you are," she said, like she had been looking for me for hours. I turned and saw a woman I had never seen before in my life, smiling, her grip firm on my arm, like we were old friends reuniting. Before I could speak, she leaned in and dropped her voice low. "That guy has been recording you," she whispered. "Follow me." My stomach dropped. I glanced back, and the man was no longer pretending to browse. He was staring right at me. I let her pull me forward without questioning it. The way she acted so casual and loud, like we genuinely knew each other, I was grateful someone had noticed and stepped in. She kept up the act as we walked, chatting about nothing while steering me through the aisles. I started expecting her to drop the pretense, but she kept going. At some point, I looked behind us, and the man was no longer following. I told her we were fine now, and that we should find my manager. She squeezed my arm tighter and said he was still somewhere in the store. I told her it was fine and planted my feet, twisting slightly to loosen her grip. "You can let go now," I said. But she did not. She smiled and said, "Come on, just a little further." I looked around. The store was nearly empty. We had passed the registers, past the self-checkout, moved past the busiest aisles. The warehouse section was ahead, dimly lit and silent. Beyond that was the side exit, the one without cameras, the one used for loading shipments. That is when it clicked. I screamed for help and yanked my arm free with everything I had. She lost her grip just enough for me to pull away. I did not stop. I ran toward the front of the store. As I did, she called out behind me, telling me to come back. Then she said my name. My actual name. A name I had never given her. I found a coworker running toward me and told him to call security. By the time I had explained everything, that woman and that man were gone. When security reviewed the footage, they confirmed what I had suspected. The man and the woman had entered together. His face was clearly captured on camera. Hers was always turned away. The police classified it as a failed abduction attempt. That man should be easy to identify from the footage. I am still waiting for an update. What terrifies me most is not the attempt itself. It is that they knew my name. Those people had not picked me at random. I was a specific target, and I do not know why. That is all 4 stories for tonight. If something like this has happened to you, we want to hear it. Send your story to thechamberfiles@gmail.com. The stories that keep us up at night are the ones we bring to you, and yours could be next inside the Chamber Files. And before you go, if these stories stayed with you, make sure you are subscribed. New stories drop every week, and you do not want to miss what is coming. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode of the Chamber Files. We will see you in the next one.